a stress ball, man. You might, I don't know what clipped up here, but you might see a mid-ranger or two.
You
So
might see a mid-range or two in here, I noticed for sure.
yeah, grab a stress ball.
So welcome everybody to Run It Back number 12. Appreciate all of you guys joining us, and for anybody who is tuning in to a replay later or listening on Spotify or listening on the podcast, we are very fortunate today to have Coach Lance Westberg joining us. Today we are exploring a rematch between Houghton and Sage. We also are very fortunate to have Lance's assistant Kendall Aldrige on the call. So first time we're basically running a staff meeting here today, as we were saying before we started up the recording. But I feel tremendously lucky to have two great coaches join us today and lend their perspective. Just if it's the first time ever tuning in to Run It Back, the premise is basically we take a game that's happened and we run it back, so to speak, discussing things we liked, how you prepared, what you would do differently, what you thought worked, what you thought didn't, etc. And basically, we just spend an hour talking with coaches in a hot stove type model, open forum, just exploring the game, so to speak. And like I was saying to Lance before we started up, I see the game a little bit different than everybody else, I think. I think a lot of coaches will feel that way about themselves. So it's always good to hear other coaches' perspectives. So we always start here. Let's start here as usual. After checking out the film or looking at the box or doing what you're doing, Matt, stop it, man. We do a little poll, and basically the poll is just, can Houghton beat Sage if we're to run it back? Lend you guys perspective, please. And it looks like we are, ooh, we got a no in there. I like it. Somebody's just trying to mix it up. So we got 43% unsure, 43% yes, and we got one no in there. All right, so to start it up, Lance, thank you very much for joining us. The game of focus that we're exploring happened January 25th. You guys lost 92-88. Typically, I like to start by just talking about the box score a little bit and some things that stood out on the box score. So both teams had 5 players in double digits. And the real big thing that I noticed right away is 60 points in the paint for Sage. So maybe speak on it to start here a little bit.
Yeah. So Sage is a unique team in our league and kind of at the D3 level as well. They're a pretty athletic team. If you look through their roster, they pull some good athletes out of Florida, New York City. So their team dynamic and makeup's a little different than some other teams in our league. Their strength as a team is getting off the bounce and getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line. They're the going into this game, they're the lowest 3-point percentage shooting team in our league. Right. And so our strategy going into the game was really to force these guys to beat us from behind the arc, and then force them into taking long twos, right? Preferably off the pull-up. And so we got away, and I think we're going to talk about this later. This is the backside of a Friday, Saturday. But what we installed the morning of, we put in our jam and under coverage. So you'll see, in some of the film, at times we ran the jam pretty well, and other times the jam wasn't quite what we needed. But we were successful in not getting beat from 3. I believe Sage ended up 3 for 14 from deep.
Yes, sir.
And we forced a number of long twos, and they didn't capitalize at a high rate there. But when the ball did get in the paint, or we failed on the jam or whatever other coverage we adjusted to, that created some problems. I think another factor in that would be the putbacks. They had 11 offensive rebounds, which resulted in 20 second chance points. And you'll see in some of the clips, it's like, we had to help, maybe uphill on a handler, and then the ball came off the rim soft for an easy catch and put back. So that's kind of how that number got inflated a little bit.
Yeah, so for me, what I found very interesting is a lot of the time, if I look at a box and I see a lot of points in the paint, I would immediately in my mind start to think like, oh, maybe they have a traditional big, or there's a big little discrepancy there in terms of like, hey, they got a back to the basket guy. But obviously the game is changing, and it did look like they had some guards that could really get in there. Just like you said, there was a huge disparity on the box in terms of 3-point shooting. They did shoot 3 of 14, which is 21%. You guys shot 43%. Can you talk a little bit about, we joked with Jimmy a little bit before we started, but order of operations of shots for you, I mean, long term over the course of a game, you would think that a team that shoots so low on 3-point shooting should not be able to beat you when you're shooting so high on 3-point shooting. And the stat that I would refer to, I actually hear this a lot in the NBA lately, is typically speaking, when a team has more than 6 more 3-pointers made than their opponent, they win 80% of the time. So with the game plan here, you mentioned you were going in, you were going under. You actually played a lot of varied coverages, and with the film, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But like you said, you were trying to go under, you were trying to cut stuff off. Is there a point in the game where you adjust what you're doing in this particular game in terms of what the philosophy is in terms of the shots that they're shooting, or do you think that you were okay overall?
Yeah, we made several little tweaks. A lot of times, we'd come out of a timeout and be to say 1 or 2 possessions, we got to throw something different at them, because you'll notice over the course of a longer run without breaks, those ball screens from the slot and a little bit to the wing, they would go from being right at the 3-point line to all of a sudden they're inching down towards the elbow, and that's just really hard to go under a screen like that when they're setting it that low. So we switched a little bit out of timeouts. We came out, we played a little zone. We threw a little bit of 1-3-1, just a handful of possessions at them, just to do something different and see if they could shoot from the corners. But yeah, we tried a few things, but I think the jam's good in maybe a low dosage, but we tried using it in a very high dosage this game.
Awesome. We're definitely going to come back to some teaching points on the screening stuff, et cetera. Like I said, I got some video queued up. I want to hear your perspective. But since we got you and your assistant in here, Kendall, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about preparation. You mentioned to me that you guys do often play the Friday, Saturday, which is what we're playing up here in Canada in the CCA and in U Sports. So back end of those 2 games, what does a scout look like for you guys? Are you, giving it to one person and they're completely responsible? Does everybody sort of share? When is it presented? All that fun stuff.
Is this one for Kendall or for me?
Yeah, either of you can jump in, please. That'd be great. Kendall, I'd love to hear your
I'll start by saying I wanted to touch on one of the keys to victory. I think our number one that game was to protect the basketball and win the turnover battle. So you guys are talking about the points in the paint. Half of those points came off turnovers.
Right.
Transition, right? So I think we at times we did a decent job in the half court, but what really hurt us was the turnovers. And I mean, once we get in the film, that'll be super clear. But go ahead, Lance.
I actually tried not to throw the turnovers in. I was just gonna ask you about them, but since you brought them up, there were 22 in this game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So in a game where you're experiencing that, this is a frustration that I experience with the players that I deal with. What kinds of things are you guys saying to your guys to keep them positive, keep them focused, try and make sure that is not something that is consistently happening?
Shoot it. Yeah, I like that, Matt. Absolutely. And you'll see actually when we did have some positive possessions, it was typically early offense, and so that's not a bad play when you're on the wrong side of the athleticism comparison. But we try to keep that next play mentality, right? We get in the huddle, don't scream and yell on the pass play too much, but focus on, hey, what do we got to do this next play to make sure we're set? Of those turnovers, some of them were just weird plays. We got had a young team last year. I mean, we had a couple plays where a freshman would just get the ball ripped out of his hands on a rebound, by a bigger, stronger player. So stuff like that. We struggled against the 1-2-2 towards the end of the first half.
Right.
just little things like getting across half court and stopping, putting the ball above our heads. So stuff that we made adjustments at halftime for. We had 4 turnovers against the 1-2-2 at the end of the first half, and we had 1 turnover in the second half against the 1-2. So
that's huge. I like that a lot. So then going back to the scouting a little bit, I mean, when I watched this game, they don't run a lot of stuff. They're running a lot of like mid ball screen, side ball screen, that kind of stuff. So how do you scout them? Are you just doing everything personnel based and your matchup based? Is like, what's it look like for you? What's the process in terms of what you guys are doing?
Try to keep it really simple in terms of, and this is a scout that, like, we don't talk about Sage the entire week because we're prepping for Utica that Friday.
Right.
So when we have shoot around, right, we got an hour. We're going to show them film for about 20 minutes. We're going to let them shoot for about 10, 15 minutes, get some shots up. And then we have about 25 minutes to go through, walking through on the court, how we're going to guard certain things. And so a lot of the time was put into the jam. Fortunately, these guys didn't have a lot of stuff to scout. If I remember right, they had kind of an isolation play. They like to get 23 downhill with a stagger on the backside. They ran a double stacks play up around the elbows to get a post entry. And they had
maybe
a cross screen, down screen, and continuity was their base. So we kept it simple to kind of those 4 main actions, and that was about it.
We would split the scouts.
Sorry, Kendall?
I said we would split the scouts. So our other assistant would have Utica on a Friday, and I would spend some time preparing for Sage that next night.
So, and like, do you guys adhere to the KISS principle of keeping it simple for your guys type deal, or are you guys okay, darling, thank you. Sorry, guys. Or are you guys very detailed in what you present, guys? Or like you mentioned, is it pretty much just all on court, walkthrough, day off type stuff?
I think it varies a little bit team to team, but also Friday to Saturday, because a Friday you have all week to prepare for. And maybe you find a little segment to, hey, we're going to work against the 1-2-2 on a Wednesday, because we know we're going to see it Saturday. But our primary focus is Friday. And then we have personnel. Everything's all typed up ahead of time, ready to go. Our assistants do a good job with that. But yeah, a lot of the X's and O's come in the walkthrough. So you're limited in how much you can actually get through on a Saturday. But
yeah, I would agree. Like we said, I have the same challenge up here and when you factor in travel, like you guys didn't travel in this particular turnaround, but when you factor it in for us, it's pretty brutal sometimes. Matt, jump in. You got a question?
Yeah, I had a question about how you guys prepare for Friday, Saturday games, because a lot of people that I've talked to and people that I know that do conferences like that, they prepare the whole time for a Friday game, but then they, like you said, like there's only like a little bit of time to prepare for Saturday, basically a 45-minute shoot around after you just played. If it's a tough game, you're playing your main guys 30-something minutes. Like, do you like put in like actions of the team you're playing on Saturday and like do those in shell? Like, how are you preparing for Saturday without actually saying, hey, we're preparing for Saturday? Like keeping the focus where the focus needs to be, but also preparing your guys.
Yeah, kind of like you're saying in shell, or you can slide in, like you got to work on press breaks sometime during the week. And you're not going to cover every single press break. So, hey, this week, let's focus on a 1-2-2. I think we looked at that for, maybe a 10-minute segment midweek. But yeah, the bulk of our focus is on the Friday game. And even more so in this case, because Sage is, they just don't have a deep playbook, but they're really good at what they do. Yeah.
So for particular players, are you giving for me, I don't give my guys individual matchups until like game time. Basically, I want everybody to prepare for everybody, especially when I play teams that use a deep rotation. Like, what did Sage play? I think they played 12 guys in this game, right? So like, I want my guys to have some semblance of what everybody does. For your particular guys, are you matching them up earlier and talking about it like, hey, I'm going to show you 2 minutes on this guy because you're going to spend a lot of time on this guy? Or is everybody taking a whole concept?
So after a Friday night game, we'll print them out a personnel sheet. This is who their starters have been, their next five, and then we have a segment of other guys. So our coaches, so I think Kendall was the lead on this one. He has like the extra guys, so we know what they do. But in a 1 day turnaround, we're not going to memorize 15 guys of personnel, or 12 or whoever's going to play. So we try to really focus on the top five, have some knowledge of the second five. This game was actually funny from a personnel standpoint. If you look at the box score, number 21 for Sage, he had played in 5 games up to that point. He has scored 3 points on the season, and he goes off for 15 against us.
And plays 15 minutes, right? So
yeah, so we had him scouted as like, all right, he's a lefty off the bench with limited role. He comes in and I think he had 10 or 12 of those in the first half too. So
yeah, I think you're right. I was also going to ask about Darius Denmark, because I thought that was sort of a similar type situation where, like, coming off the bench and he gets 18 minutes and he only has 3 points, but he's kind of getting in the lane at will, it looks like. So I'm wondering how many guys you review that are coming off the bench, or if you're doing it all as like one big thing, like you were saying. And
we actually had, in the scout, we had Denmark in the starting lineup, so they made a little tweak on us there. So we were well aware of him. But
yeah, all right, right on.
I think we had a question, Matt or
yeah,
Jimmy
I was just
going to jump in.
So Brant had just asked, basically, how do you monitor minutes? Like, obviously, it becomes a concern in terms of injury, in terms of being fresh, et cetera. So when you got a back-to-back coming, do you spread out things before, like, hey, we can't give this guy more than 25 in the second night, or like, is it an eye test type thing?
This was an interesting weekend because we had tight games Friday and Saturday. So I mean, we're gonna go put our best guys on the floor, Friday and Saturday. We didn't necessarily have the depth to be saying, hey, let's cut this guy 8-10 minutes. So we took everything we had to compete Friday night. We had to turn around and play a tough game again. During the week, we try to be cognizant of the workload on these guys. So a lot of times during the week in conference, when you're playing Friday, Saturday, we'll take a Tuesday and just do film and maybe shoot, have a really light day. But our typical practice, once we're into conference season, we're probably only on the floor an hour and 15 minutes, with that last 15 minutes being some walkthrough stuff. And then we're letting film teach a little more. So we're not a 3-hour a night grind it out. Not when you're playing 7-8 guys.
You're not a big yeller and screamer for 3 hours, you're saying?
Believe it or not.
Nice. So let's talk in game a little bit now. Specifically, I want to start at halftime. So from my perspective, it looks like you're leading the large majority of the first half and you're making shots. You end up going into half, I believe you're down 3. Yeah, down 3 at the half. So what are you talking to with your staff, to your guys? What are you thinking in your head in terms of adjustments that need to be made? You mentioned, obviously, the 1-2-2. You had scouted it a little bit. There's fewer turnovers in the second half, so I would imagine you talk about it a little bit. But what specifically are you going through? We don't have a lot of time at our levels. Mm-hmm. We don't get the 45-minute halftime. So what are you going through? How are you prioritizing?
Yeah, 1-2-2, I remember being a major focus. I mean, turnovers is the issue, right? The 1-2-2 is how we diagnosed it, right? And just really making sure that we got our, when a trap comes, we got our sideline option, we got our middle option, we got our throwback option. And what we were really lacking in this game, our middle option was hiding a little bit behind the second line. So in the first half, we struggled to get the ball to the middle of the court. And then we had to remind the guys of some elementary things, like against a press like a 1-2-2, like you're not going to dribble across half court and pick it up, right? Like that's the worst place we can stop. So just simple things like that. running to meet the ball, just reminders that.
Uh-oh, we froze up a bit. You there, Lance? Kendall, you want to take it for a little bit until we get him back? Uh-oh.
School internet's out.
Apparently. Was that me or is that them?
Well, I'm still here, so
Yeah.
I think it's them. I think it was their.
There got to be in the trap.
I got Kendall back. Kendall, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let's
He's in the office next door. I got.
all right, no problem.
Man.
I like that.
Hey, back in.
Nice. Little bit of technical difficulties there. Sorry, everybody, but we lost you right in the middle of the 1-2-2 prep that you were talking about there.
Yeah, I was just saying we were just reviewing the fundamentals. Like if a guy's getting trapped, we got to create some space, and back out of the trap a little bit. We need a sideline, middle, and a reversal option. And I think our biggest weak point in the first half was our middle option. We got to get to that hole in the middle of the press. We were kind of hiding in line with the second layer of the press, so it wasn't a very attractive option. And then we made some poor choices. So,
At what point in the season?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the other thing we talked about was dribbling across half court and stopping, putting the ball back. That's a fundamental thing.
At what point in the
season?
Oh, sorry, Kendall. No, go ahead, please. I apologize.
I remember one other thing we covered at half is talking over our jam and unders, getting our under guy to meet the ball a little bit higher on the floor. Because what they were doing was they were getting ahead of steam. That's obviously something you're going to give up sometimes, but we wanted to make sure our guys understood that they had to meet the ball after they got under the screen. They had to come back high level of the screen and meet the ball because they were getting to the rim too easily.
Well, to that effect, I believe that's a natural segue. I got a few clips, and I was wondering if maybe you guys could just talk on some of your teaching points. They're pretty much all just screen coverages. Are we good? Can we see this size-wise? Awesome. So we're near the beginning of the game here. We got to step up, and that looks like a drop to me. And I feel like he just kind of gets hung on the screen. So what are you guys seeing when you look at that? And how does it fall into your teaching points, et cetera? And give me the rundown.
Yeah, their base offense, they're setting like a drag ball screen there. They're taking something to the middle, and then they went and flipped it. I think that was an adjustment they were making. If I remember right, we were in jam right off the bat. So this is a broken or kind of a failed coverage by our big man here, the tall, skinny freshman. So we still don't mind going under kind of that flipped screen like that. And just if they want to dribble towards the corner, by all means, we just can't let them turn the corner and get the hill.
So if you were in drop, let's just say hypothetically, at what point are you teaching this freshman to get back? And at what point are you saying he's now cut off the ball handler? Because to me, it looks like 33, your freshman that you mentioned, Darren Clark, just basically never even slows the ball down and gives your ball defender a chance there.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't actually teach drop coverage. That wasn't in our base rules. And so it's really not a teaching emphasis for us last year. Our base rules were to flat hedge, or we call it plug in the middle third, and then we were gonna hard hedge on the outer third. So
nice. So that one should have been a hard hedge at that point.
Well, we were in jam and under.
We were jamming. Sorry,
so we should have been jamming. Yeah.
All right. So second one here. I'll run it through a few times just in case there's any sort of lag internet-wise. But basically what we're looking at is just coming down in transition for anybody who's listening later. And we've got another step-up screen headed towards the center. And we're under again, but it looks like our big – the guy who's screening on their team came without his man. It looks like your big is just completely dropped. You are able to recover, force a pass to the other side, but this is pretty early in the game. Is this a blown coverage, or is this a personnel-based thing that you guys are doing?
This is a blown coverage, and looking back after the game, we were saying like, man, we got to look back at our implementation sequence and make sure Jam's getting a little more attention, in October, and it's not something we got to do every day, but that's something we got to hit on, if not every other week, maybe even every week, just so guys have it in their toolbox,
Right.
and have some better habits.
So let's speak on that a little bit just before I go to the next clip. What are you guys doing currently for your implementation of coverages? Like, are you of the mindset where you do one thing and do it pretty well, or maybe one and a counter, or were you currently doing, hey, let's at least do a walkthrough of everything so they get an idea of all the different things, and then we can make decisions based upon that for matchups, etc.
Yeah, well, sorry to be an excuse guy here. Last year was year one, so everything's new
Right.
in year one. So we were really trying to establish our base rules, and then we would spend a small portion of time on some of our adjustment
Right.
coverages.
I don't think that's a BCD at all. Like, for anybody who's listening, I had the good fortune of working at camp with Lance once last year. And like, I think Lance is a tremendous coach. So, I mean, everybody knows, like, Brant is on here. Brant talks about the first 30 days, first 60 days in his special. And like, there's a lot of things that you got to put together that first time you're taking the reins and putting things together. Right. So, time management is a huge thing, and being able to figure out what works for you takes, I mean, I asked it last night in the G League panel on Rising Coaches, just like, hey, how do you guys find your own voice? And I think the most common answer is really, it just takes reps. Like, you just got to get out there and fail a bit until you succeed, so to speak, right? So appreciate the honesty there, but I don't think that's an excuse. I think that's just a very fair statement of where you were, right? So let's take a look one more here. This one, I believe I saw, if it's the correct clip, I think I saw a couple different screen coverages in here. So there's a jam and under for you. But I think at the beginning of the clip, I saw something else here. Yeah, so we start with the drop and under there. And then on the same clip, when we get to the second side, we get to the proper coverage. So again, blown coverage, I'm assuming at the start there, and at the second one, you're doing what you need to be doing. What are your teaching points on that jam and under? Like, what are you telling the screen defender? And Kendall mentioned it a little bit when he spoke about, like, still trying to be able to cut it off. Like, he should be able, if you're going under, you should be able to cut the guy off on the bounce. He shouldn't be able to turn the corner on you. So maybe talk a little bit about what your teaching points are in your practice and how you're teaching it.
Yeah, on the jam, so our skinny kid here is 25, but you can't see his numbers. On the jam, we want to eliminate any space between him and the screener. Okay, so he needs to be like chest to shoulder, and he's not going to allow any roll from the screener. All right, and we got to make that screen as skinny as possible by getting body to body. The guy guarding the handler here, number 15 for us, he's got to mirror the ball handler. Right, so you'll see there's actually a clip later in the second half where we try to beat the handler to a spot. We jump too early. He rejects the screen and gets downhill. So we want to mirror the ball handler to keep him in front.
Do you teach anything at this point about forcing them to use it and getting into them? Like, when you're talking about mirroring, should number 15 be stepping up and into him, forcing him to go over it right now? Or are you okay with the amount of space that he has between himself and the ball handler?
Yeah, we're fine with him having some space there. If he wants to pull it from there, that plays right into what we want, the kind of shots we want this team to take. So might be different against a different team.
So for me, I think one of the teaching points that I have a lot of the time is get into the guy and force him to use it. Like, if we're going to jam, in essence, in my opinion, we're playing 4-on-4. We're taking the bigs out of the scenario. Mm-hmm. And I want him to use it. I just, like you mentioned, I don't think I added it, but I saw the exact clip that you were talking about where the reject happened. And I think one of the worst things that can happen if you're in a jam and under, like we call this our purple and under. So purple means jam for us. If we're in purple and under, I want the guy using it by all means. I don't want him to be able to reject. So let's go one more. We're in a jam and under. And then I wanted to just ask you about
Menelik, sorry. Can you go back to that point of the screen
absolutely.
on the last one? A quick
Yeah.
question. I thought a couple of clips ago, I think maybe it was in that first one. I thought their big had a pretty good screening angle. This guy's screening angle right here, I think is pretty terrible, which allows 15 to get under. Like, so if this screen, like if I'm on the same opinion. If you pressure the ball, not to like to get over it, but it makes the screen come higher and it allows the guard to get under at a higher point. Like if that was a good screening angle, like so say if the big was down a step and a half, do you think there's any way 15 beats them even to the restricted area? How do you teach that?
No, that's a great point. I'm gonna write that down, Matt, as maybe a point of emphasis for us this year. Yeah, I guess our thought when we were teaching it is that the screener's defender would kind of influence where the screen is set, right? We're not going to let him run to his ideal screening spot. We're going to kind of force him, hopefully without fouling, to set that screen a little higher by being physical. But I love your comment there.
So interesting, because like when I was at York University, same idea, Lance. When we were jamming, we were trying to get the guy higher and specifically to ruin his screening angle. So like in FIBA, I don't know comparatively what it's like in D3 basketball, but in FIBA, you can be quite a bit more physical with a screener. And one of the teaching points that we have is not just chest to body, but we can actually get forearms on the guy and push him up the floor type deal. So interesting. I like it higher so that your guy can get through, but I also do still like the forcing him into the angle. I don't know what the correct answer is to Matt's question, though, in terms of what do you do if the screening angle is better? Because I think ultimately for me, I would probably change the coverage at that point if he's proving to be a really good screener and he's coming with or without his man, etc. Do you, like in terms of the shot spectrum analysis, do you feel that the jam and under plays into them taking more long twos, which is ultimately what you were looking for?
Yeah, that was a big reason for our strategy, and I think it promotes the stop and pop three. And I mean, against this team, we said if that's how they beat us, that's how they beat us. But most teams, that's the reason why jam and under is not a base coverage for us. Because at the D3 level, you typically get undersized kids that are like better shooters, maybe not great athletes, but better shooters. So jam is usually not a common ball screen coverage at our level.
So going to that next clip. One of the things I wanted to ask you about in this clip, so like you're in a jam and under here again. It looks like he arrives late and kind of hits his own man a little bit, takes away, increases the ability to drive. But when you get to the second side and get in to a secondary one, where are you teaching help from? So get your coverages predominantly right. You get deeper in the shot clock. Here we come. We're turning the corner. You got a high tag here or a high dig. I'm just wondering how that factors into what you teach. And then you don't have a full commit from the guy in the hole. Also wondering, like, what is correct for you guys?
Yeah, so our point guard, the number one, the kid, we play kind of our base rule is kind of a pack line style. So he's actually in pretty good position. He's stunting at the handler here. I'm not seeing a fault from the gap defender there, number one by the logo. But we have to force the screen to be set a little bit higher. And honestly, we have to get through underneath. I'm seeing 25 right now being able to roll into our primary defender, number 5. Okay. And that should never happen if you're in a jam, right?
Right.
You should never roll into an on-ball defender. So maybe I don't know, maybe things just got mucked up here, but with a better jam, that never happens.
So from your perspective, are you more of a high tag or a low tag guy? Like, how many guys are you willing to involve in the screen and roll? I think ultimately is my question. And like, is your particular guy right now doing what he's supposed to be doing? I think you kind of said yes, but with that high tag or that high dig, and then is your lower guy doing what he's supposed to be doing, or is he coming late from your perspective?
Yeah, philosophically here, the jam and under should be a 2-player coverage, right? You shouldn't need a lot of extra help. One being in the gap, he probably should be a stunt guy just to promote maybe a pickup. And then the guy at the rim, that's our last line of defense. Okay, if they've turned the corner and gotten deep in the paint, it's probably over there. So
we got a question in the chat from Greg, and I don't think I fully understand it, Greg. So maybe you could unmute, but I'll try it. I know he's busy with work at the same time. So he says, weird question, maybe not relevant, but when I watch film, I find there are a lot of low hands, lazy off ball stances, late to rotate, and not a lot of hand pressure on ball handlers. Was there a change in defensive philosophy that I missed the bus on? Not just these clips, but each week I noticed the same thing on Run It Back. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, I think ultimately what he's asking is like, I think Greg and I both grew up in a hand checking era. So we're used to quite a bit more in terms of active hands. Have you noticed that the teaching points have diminished on that, or have you noticed that the rules have really sort of changed? I think I've got the gist of it there from what Greg is saying.
yeah, at least a point of emphasis at our level, when the ball's on the ground, they really emphasize showing hands on the ball versus, you used to be able to get kind of a steering forearm on them a little bit, but yeah, we really emphasize showing hands. But I agree with Greg. I think our hands are low a lot of times, which for an undersized team, that makes us even more undersized. So, yeah, that's a good thing we could adjust to.
So when you're teaching, like, all right, give me an idea of your season last year. What are you starting with as a coach in terms of implementing stuff? And when you get to defense, are you starting on ball? Are you putting in everything via shell? Are you starting with the screen coverages? Like, what's your point of view there?
Oh, man.
Take it real philosophical on you right now.
What did we do, or what do we wish we did?
How about both? I'd actually really like to hear your point. Like, so for me, I'm in a similar situation to you. I'm a relatively new head coach, right? And I think I have a lot of good thoughts, but I don't know what works well for me yet. And I'm trying to constantly get better. And I've had the good fortune of sitting in a lot of these Zooms and hearing a lot of really, really smart coaches lend feedback. So what did you start with? And now in hindsight, what do you think should you have started with?
Yeah, what we started with was a little bit of it was on ball. We talked basic stance. And then we taught a lot out of a shell. We emphasized competition maybe more in the shell looking back than we should have taught more technique the first couple of weeks and made sure our technique was really solid. Maybe this was me being first-year head coach, new group, but we were just so excited to compete and get after it versus making sure we had mastered the fundamentals of what we wanted in our system. One adjustment we've made, and this is, again, something I learned as a first-year head coach, and Kendall, I was a late hire. I got hired the day before our Rising Coaches Conference started. So
I remember, yeah.
First day of Rising Coaches was my first day as a head coach. But Kendall, we hired him in August. He moved out here from Phoenix and got here October 1. We started practice October 15th. So we're still feeling each other out. But Kendall's been amazing this year. Obviously invested a ton of time this summer and through the pandemic and everything. But this year we're changing. Like, my voice got used too much last year. And at my roots, I'm probably more of an offensive-minded coach, whereas Kendall's an excellent defensive coach. So we're actually changing the dynamic of our staff a little bit to where I'm more of an offensive coordinator, and Kendall's actually going to be our defensive coordinator. And then we have another assistant, Coach Specs, who's going to be on here, and he's going to do kind of some of our special teams. So we've made some changes, and so to our staff structure, but yeah, Kendall's going to be running the defense. And Kendall, maybe you want to talk a little bit about implementation this year.
Yeah, because so first of all, are you going to have a guide hand or a stick hand in your teaching, just to Greg's point, or are you completely chest them out type deal and angles?
No, we're gonna have a stick hand. That's actually our terminology that we're gonna use. So it's all in the teaching and what you emphasize, and we're gonna record some stuff and reward some stuff, and just promote it throughout the program. But yeah, I mean, we see the same things you guys are seeing, right? Like low hands, lazy stances. Our first non-negotiable is stance, right? And we talked about that with our guys here recently. So as far as implementation, we actually went over this as a staff a few weeks ago. I heard Brandon Dunstan talk. I believe that's his name. And he went over some stuff, and I thought it was really good. So we stole some stuff from him, and we're just going to start with base defense, and it goes all the way down up into rebounding. But base defense and on-ball defense is what we're going to start with. Just footwork and, how we're going to protect the middle of the floor. And then we'll get into some closeout stuff, how we want to close out to the top foot. And then we'll get to the off-ball defense and go from there.
Closing out to the top foot, are you thinking that you're going to try and become a little bit more sideline baseline?
Yeah, we want to protect the middle, so we're not going to be full chest to sideline. But if we can dictate where the ball goes, we want that ball to stay on or to get driven, the sideline, baseline area. And we're going to try to force more turnovers that way.
And you mentioned rewarding behaviors. What kind of stuff are you talking about there? Just like increased playing time, or like how does that work for you? How do you reward positives and et cetera?
I'll let Boss Man talk about what the final reward is, but some of the things that we're going to record, like deflections, that's worth 2 points in our system. Charges are worth 4 points in our system. We're going to keep track of these things, every game. Offensive rebounds, just encourage them to play harder, just giving them a little sense of want to, I guess, play a little harder. But I'll let Boss Man talk about what the final reward is.
Yeah, man. Cut me off here before too long, or some of these guys are going to miss lunch. I'm a former high school math teacher, so I love the analytics side of it. We have 4 analytical structures that we look at, and I'll talk about the 2 that we do in practice. First of all, on an individual level, I got this from Reggie Witherspoon up at Canisius when we went up to see him last year. But he had managers basically charting made and missed 2s, made and missed 3s in competitive actions. Okay, not just like a shooting drill.
Right.
We're gonna offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds. It's basically like we're statting practice. Turnovers we're looking at. So we're looking at an individual basis there. And then we have what we call as a winner's board. So every time we try to do a lot of short-sided games in practice as like teaching tools. So a lot of times it's 3 minutes on the clock. And, if it's 3-on-3 on a side or something, okay, that group that wins that 3-minute game, they pick up a W that day. All right. And so you might have an opportunity for 10 W's throughout our practice. And then we put that up in the locker room so guys can see who's the common denominator in in winning teams. And so that's just a couple things we do in practice. What Coach Aldrige was talking about here, in games, we reward like 4 points for a charge, and we call it our Highlander Award. But, we got -2 if you get beat on defense, like a straight line drive, and 1 or 2 for deflection. So we got this whole equation thing, and guys can win an award. They'll get the name up on a plaque in our locker room. So all that stuff. We can go deeper into that later, but
no, I appreciate and I was just laughing in my head. I can't believe I've made it this far in this call without making a Highlander joke. There can be only one. Sorry, tacky. I know. Let's go 2 more because there's a couple shocks or high hedges that I think you went to that I want to take a look at and just kind of get your feedback on what happened there. But I believe we got one more jam and under here. And what ends up happening is you get the stop and pop that you briefly talked about. What's going on with my film? Hold on. Excuse me. Stop and pop. We're on this one here, and we've got the stop and pop. So this goes back a little bit to what I was asking about getting into the ball handler. And his screener even really kind of comes without his man to a little bit. But by not steering him into the jam and under, was this, and I anticipate the answer is no, but was this even a concern for you given the percentage that they shoot from the 3-point line?
You got to give up something, right? So
Yeah.
I'll watch that shot go all day versus watching these guys put up 80 points in the paint.
Yeah. Sounds fair to me. I understand that. All right, so we got into, there was a shock and under here. A shock we call a high hedge, and I'm just wondering if that's what the plan was here. So we're right at the point of it here. Is that scout-based? Is that an adjustment that you had made? We're still first half, so I would anticipate no, but like, did the jam just not happen here and he just drove him up the floor to allow him time to get back? Like, what's happening here?
Gotta jog my memory here. I can't remember if this is like right after a timeout, because like I said, we like to come out after a timeout and throw in a different coverage. But seeing the on-ball defender go under, that makes me think that maybe this is a guy just being a wild card here.
Yeah, so it's not after a timeout. You're about 7 minutes into the game, 6.5 minutes in, give or take, and no screen defender there. So I think your screen defender just decides I'm going to drive him up and recover.
Mm-hmm.
Did you just accidentally execute a very good shock there, or was that a scout base for Darius?
That was not scout base. Sorry. That's our big running our base coverage, and our senior freshman big doing our base coverage, and our senior point guard doing the game coverage.
So that's awesome. And the reason I say that's awesome is mistakes happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a perfect game. How would you address this in game? Like, what is your personal philosophy on allowing your players to achieve flow versus correcting them repeatedly all the time? Like, would you let this one go and just politely remind him, or would you be very upset?
Yeah, I mean, philosophically, we're just reminding them and saying, hey, next play, just make sure we're on it. And realistically, it's probably different if they score or not. Something we probably got to be better at, but
Yeah,
that's the truth.
It's a outcome-based industry for sure. You have one more here that I also thought looked like a shock or maybe even a switch. He doesn't really get very high. It might even be the second one on this. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's the second one here. So we get split. This is towards the end of the game. This is pretty important possession. It looks like varied coverages within the same play. And I'm wondering if maybe this particular one is somebody missing something, or if you've gone scout-based at halftime and made some changes here. So you've got, on the first one, basically a switch happening and a gamble for the ball. And then when we get second side, like, is he still supposed to be jamming, or is this a shock that he just blows?
I actually think we're in switch here. We did a little more switch in the second half than just jam. So I'm pretty sure we're in a switch possession here.
Will you switch 1 through 5?
We did to start. Again, this is a switch for us would be that would be kind of an adjustment defense. It's not in our base. Typically, we would switch sames in our base. But I think we just said switch everything and keep the ball in front, if I remember right.
And in an ideal world, obviously, he's not getting split and not reaching for it. But where would you like help to come from if he does get beat like this? Are you a guy who's from the hole in this scenario?
Yeah, yeah. We call him the MIG, right? The most important guy.
Yeah.
And that's new this year. But anyways, he should have 2 feet in the paint. And since there's no post on the left side here, probably be itching towards the midline.
Right.
So he can step up and help. Okay.
And then I got two more with where would you like help to come from? So this is a little bit earlier in the game, but it looked like to me, so this is the clip that we were talking about. It looked like to me that you were supposed to be in the jam and under here, didn't get into him, and he was able to reject. So once he rejects, I mean, ideally we're talking about probably should have been into the ball handler. But if you're okay with it not being, where would you like help to come from? Because looks like you got 3 to the ball right here. Are you a ball side help guy, or are you from the MIG in this particular case again with stuff happening on the backside?
Yeah, we typically help from the MIG, and we want to stunt and stay in the corner, the ball side corner.
Right.
Especially with the guys that's on the floor for them right now, their best shooting threat is in the left corner.
Interesting.
So this is I don't know if he's just trying to save a bucket here, but this is not the right play. It needs to come from the help side. But if we go back to jam and under, this is a 2-player coverage, right? Like if you go under and give a guy 4 to 6 feet, you should be able to stay in front of that handler, right? And the roller's not going anywhere, so it really should be a 2-player coverage.
Did you ever in this game consider going away from jam and under and just entirely doing something else? Like you mentioned, you did start doing some switching, I suppose answers my question, but like it does look like even though you still end up in some scenarios where you went back to that coverage.
Yeah, we did switch a little bit. That's why we were at that at the end of the game when you showed the clip with a minute and a half left. I think that's what we ended the game on. But then yeah, we mixed in a little zone out of timeouts. But
we got some observations in there. Has to be 15 helping and strong corner needs to stay. And then Kendall's just getting back to him like, correct, that's our philosophy. Just for anybody who's listening, watching after.
Yep.
And so I want to talk about play after play just before we stop video, because I didn't do a lot of your film. Didn't want to expose all the secrets, but you run a lot of what we would call push up here, where your cross screen down screen action, sometimes called America's play, and sometimes you've ended up in the elevator, sometimes you've ended up in a double pin down, sometimes it's just a single pin down. I'm wondering what you're teaching as play after play on this particular action if you don't get the primary action. What are your concepts that you teach your guys to play within if you don't set a good screen or if you don't get the action all the way through? Like we end up mid-range jump shot here, but
sorry, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah, play after play, we have kind of a role-based motion. So our bigs, we wanted to get them screening and then scoring more off the second cut. Being a guy that can slip. Our big man was 6'7", 175 freshman. Okay, so he's not going to slug it out inside. He's not a shooter either, but he's pretty effective. I think he had 19, 18 points in this game. A lot of times it's screen, roll to some space and make a play. We had some guys that could stretch the floor, so we just wanted them moving off ball. So kind of a 4-out principle, 4-out motion principle, with our big being more of a screener than a post player, I guess, if we had to really condense it.
You mentioned you play in small-sided games. Do you ever specifically do a primary action like America and then you're live from after it not working? Is that ever something you've implemented?
I guess no, that hasn't been a focal point in our practices, but I think that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, like I think a lot of what we do that I've come across has been wanting to, I don't know what's going on there, sorry. it has been wanting to give our guys the tools to be able to play basketball more seamlessly. So like, I love the small sided games approach. Obviously it's being taught more and more. And I think it's kind of funny because when I played basketball way back when dinosaurs ran the earth, everybody was like, no, you don't play in practice. You just do drills and you just, like coaches would tell us, don't play. And now we're getting to a teaching scenario where almost everything is playing and quite a bit less of doing just the drills, so to speak. It's more implementation within certain scenarios. And I appreciate that more as a coach. Lance, Kendall, I want to take a minute to just like give you guys a huge shout out, a huge, huge message of appreciation for taking the time today to sit down with us, talk, tell us your point of view. I think if you ran this one back, you guys have them. The points in the paint were obviously a contributing factor. The turnovers were obviously a contributing factor. But I'm like overall looking at the game, I think you guys matched up well. And I think Sage is up for a hard matchup next year. Just in closing, were there any particular things that you like when preparing for this today or when watching film afterwards, as I'm sure you did quite a few times, were there any particular things that really stood out that you wanted to maybe give a shout out to for the other coach, just like, hey, that was good coaching. I liked that. Good job on that. Like, what's a virtual pat on the back that maybe you had?
They ran, Brian Barnes of Sage. First of all, like class act guy. He was when I got the job here. He was the first coach in the league to send a note, "Hey, welcome to the league." So, love Coach Barnes up at Sage. One thing they did really well. Obviously, they adjusted the level of their screens, and they saw we're jamming. But they made a really good adjustment. It was the last minute or two of the game. They ran a double high, like stacked flat ball screen. And so
exactly what we were talking about.
Really, our guys, they're thinking, I think we were switching at that point and we didn't get a good switch, but that was like, man, we got to go hats off on that call. Just a really good adjustment on their part. So they got downhill, they got an easy layup, and that was a point where we were trying to take it from like 6 to 8 and, maybe make it a 2-possession game.
It's in the last minute for sure. I know exactly what you're talking about. I liked that play too. I was like, hey, where did that come from? You guys didn't run anything all game.
Oh yeah, I thought that was masterful, and that was kind of the nail in the coffin. So.
Yeah, I thought to get there, the one good thing they did was go to that 1-2-2. We were up 13 in the first half. They went to that 1-2-2, and they came back and turned it around and went into the halftime up 3. So they really changed the tempo of the game with that 1-2-2.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Like you said, it was 4 turnovers in the first half with that 1-2-2. It was almost as if they implemented it at a time where your guys had like forgotten about it from the scout and took a little bit of time to adjust. And, it's a matter of possessions, right? Ultimately, this is, what do we finish as? A 4-point game here, right? So two possessions. That's all it takes. Guys, again, big thank you for joining us. For anybody who is tuning in and watching the replay, please join us next week as we discuss Broward versus Eastern Florida State with Brian McCormick, which is the first time we're going to take a look at some women's basketball. And then in addition, I can't stress this enough, Lance, you've always been a class act towards me, so I really appreciate you taking the time and look forward to maybe seeing you at a camp or a Rising Coaches event. And then obviously I'm going to finish by saying very special thank you to Rising Coaches for putting together the network of coaches that love to sit around and chop it up with me. And I'm so much better of a coach because of it. So really, really appreciate. And if you're listening and you're not a member of, please go and join Rising Coaches because you're really missing out on some great content on there. I'll stop the recording there. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Thank you, man.